Her boots slipped on the icy sidewalk as she stumbled into the tiny harbor diner, her breath trembling in the frozen air. A 7-year-old girl clutched a torn coat to her chest, eyes wide with terror. "Please, someone help my mom," she cried, voice cracking from the cold and from fear. Conversations died instantly. Forks froze mid-air. Every customer turned. And the man she ran to wasn't just any stranger. He was a battle-scarred former Navy SEAL who had already lost the two people he loved most. What he chose to do next would change all their lives forever. Stay with me to the end, because this true act of courage will warm even the coldest winter night. Before we begin, remember to like the video, share it with someone who needs hope today, comment where you're watching from, and hit subscribe so you never miss a story of faith, kindness, and second chances. The Girl in the Winter Night. The winter wind knifed through Boston's Harbor District, carrying thin swirls of snow across the empty street. Ethan Cole stood behind the counter of his small sidewalk food stall, Harbor Night Grill, flipping a patty on the griddle. The rising steam curled around his face. At 43, Ethan had the build of a man who once lived on battlefields, broad shoulders, long arms, and a jawline sharpened more by endurance than vanity. Faint lines creased the corners of his eyes, marks not of age, but of years spent scanning horizons for danger. His walk carried a subtle hitch from an old knee injury, the kind that reminded him of cold water missions and things he could never say aloud. Beside him lay Hunter, his 5-year-old German shepherd. The dog's coat was a rich blend of black and tan, thick enough to hold off the wind. Hunter's head was large and noble, ears always half raised as if listening for a sound others missed. His black harness bore the clear words, "Service dog, do not pet." Hunter's temperament was quiet vigilance. He barked only when judgment, not fear, told him to. Ethan lived simply now. Burgers, soup, coffee, and silence. Those were the pillars of his nights. Customers came and went, night shift workers with sore hands, taxi drivers with tired eyes, and the occasional wanderer who paid in loose change. Ethan spoke little to any of them. He had once been a Navy SEAL with teammates who trusted their lives to him. Now, he was a man who trusted almost no one. Pain had carved that distance. Years earlier, his wife Rachel, small, warm, smiling, hair the soft brown color of late autumn, had died with their daughter Grace in what officials called a gas leak accident. But Ethan had seen enough covert sabotage to know when something had been staged. The twisted metal, the scorch pattern, the sudden silence from people who once returned his calls. Someone had erased the truth, and with it the life he cherished. If Grace had lived, she would be about the age of the little girls who sometimes lingered by his stall to watch Hunter wag his tail. He still dreamed of Grace's laughter, high, fragile, cutting straight through him like cold wind on the harbor. Tonight the cold felt sharper than usual. The snowflakes drifted sideways, skimming across the pavement like pale insects trying to outrun the storm building offshore. At the far end of the street, a small figure stumbled around the corner. Lily Parker was 7 years old, but fear made her look younger. She was slim, almost fragile, with long dark hair clinging wetly to her cheeks. Her red coat was torn at the sleeve, its buttons mismatched as if repaired hastily with whatever thread her mother could find. Her gloves were missing, her sneakers were soaked. On her pale face, blotches of cold mingled with smudges of dirt and tears. She looked like a child who had run farther than her legs were ever meant to carry. Behind her, several blocks away, stood the rundown apartment building where she had lived with her mother, Anna Parker. Anna was a woman in her early 30s, tall but slender from months of skipped meals. Her hair, a sandy blonde tone dulled by exhaustion, was usually tied in a quick knot just to keep it out of her way while she juggled 2 jobs. She had gentle eyes, even when bruised from stress or lack of sleep, and she had always shielded Lily from the ugliness around them. Until tonight, when the men demanding payment burst into their apartment. Lily had seen their tattoos, the glint of rings on their fists, the way one of them laughed while pushing her mother to the floor. Anna had tried to protect her little girl, telling her to hide behind the counter, telling her not to make a sound, telling her everything would be fine. But the last thing Lily heard before she slipped out the back stairwell was her mother's cry, short and sharp, the kind that made children run. Now she ran through the winter wind, lungs burning with cold and panic. She didn't know who to find. She didn't know where safety lived. All she knew was she needed help. Someone strong enough, someone brave enough, someone who wouldn't freeze when she said the words she most feared. Her eyes caught the flicker of a warm sign, Harbor Night Grill. Through its fogged window, she saw a tall man flipping something on a grill, his shoulders wide enough to carry doors off hinges. A dog rested beside him, its head lifting just slightly, as if sensing the world beyond the glass. To a terrified child, that image, man and dog in golden light, looked like a refuge carved out of the cold. Lily pushed herself forward, feet slipping on the slush, breath sharp in the air. Each step felt heavier, her vision blurring at the edges. The light from the food stall shimmered like a beacon. Her knee buckled. She caught herself, then stumbled again. Hunter's ears shot forward. The dog lifted his head, gaze locked onto the small shape approaching. Inside, Ethan reached for the spatula, oblivious to the drama unfolding outside. But Hunter rose to his paws, tail stiff, sensing something the way dogs of his training always did. His body leaned forward in silent readiness. Lily dragged herself closer, her chest heaving, her fingers purple with cold. The last stretch of pavement felt endless, like a frozen ocean she had to cross alone. 5 steps from the awning, her strength finally gave out. Her legs crumpled, her palms slapped the snow, and her breath left her in a small, frightened whimper. Hunter barked, once. A low, quick alert. The wind carried the sound through the stall as the golden light spilled across the snow. And it remained uncertain whether Ethan Cole had turned in time to see the small girl collapse on the frozen pavement before his door. The lost shield and the shadow of a daughter, Hunter's bark still echoed faintly in Ethan Cole's ears as he pushed through the doorway and into the snow. The cold bit deep, slicing against his cheeks, but the harsh weather barely registered. His instincts, those old buried reflexes forged in distant war zones, had already taken over. The small figure lay crumpled near the stall's edge, a fragile bundle of red fabric and trembling breath. Ethan knelt beside her, his knee protesting with a sharp pulse, but he ignored it. He slipped his arms beneath her, lifting with the gentleness of someone afraid the world might break her further. The girl was impossibly light. Her coat was torn along one shoulder, the lining exposed. Her skin was chalk pale beneath the dull streetlight. Bruises ringed her wrist, thin marks that told stories children were never meant to tell. Her lips were a dark, worrying shade of blue. Snowflakes clung to her lashes like grains of salt. Hunter pressed close, the dog's warm breath fogging the night air. His gaze locked outward in a protective arc. His muscles were tight beneath his coat, a silent warning to the unseen world. Ethan carried the child into the glow of Harbor Night Grill. He set her gently on the padded bench near the counter. Steam from the griddle wrapped around them like a shield against the cold. A moment later, the girl stirred, coughing hard, her tiny frame shaking as she dragged in air. Her eyes fluttered open, wide, dark, swimming in panic. Then she began to cry. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was the soft, breaking sound of someone who had held too much fear inside herself for too long. Ethan felt something shift in his chest. "Easy," he murmured, his voice steady through long practice. "You're safe now." The girl shook her head violently, her breath hitched. "No, no, they're hurting her. They're hurting my mom." Her words spilled out in uneven bursts. "They'll kill her. Please, please help." Ethan's world compressed to a single point. For a heartbeat, he could not respond. Instead, an image slammed into him. Unwanted, vivid, unstoppable. Grace, his daughter's small arms around his neck, her hair tickling his chin as she begged him not to leave for deployment. The last time he saw her. The last time she laughed. The last time she lived. His pulse hammered against his ribs. He had not been there to save his own child. The guilt had clung to him, coiled around him like barbed wire for years. And tonight, as he looked into Lily's frightened eyes, that guilt twisted, sharper than ever. Hunter nudged his hand once, as if sensing the storm gathering inside him. Ethan inhaled slowly, grounding himself in the warmth of the stall, the presence of the dog, and the fragile life before him. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Lily," she whispered. "Lily Parker." Her voice cracked. She seemed so small, nothing but skin, and fear and desperate hope. He asked her what had happened, and Lily haltingly recounted everything, stopping only to swallow tears. Her mother Anna, he now learned, worked night shifts at a cramped restaurant and cleaned offices in the early mornings. A tall woman, thin from exhaustion, with blonde hair usually tied behind her neck. A gentle woman who apologized when she bumped into anyone, even when she was the one hurt. Tonight, she had been cornered in their tiny apartment by men who demanded payment for a debt she could never have paid. 3 men, tattoos, rings, a belt buckle shaped like a wolf's head. Ethan's jaw locked. He had seen men like that, predators who fed on fear. Lily continued, her voice becoming a trembling thread. They closed the door. They pushed her. She said, "Run." I didn't want to, but she said it again, so I ran. And I didn't stop. Her face crumpled. Hunter stepped closer, resting his head on the bench beside her leg. It worked better than any words. Lily's crying eased a little as she stroked the thick fur behind his ear. Ethan straightened, a quiet decision forming with finality. He moved across the stall until he stood beneath the glowing heat lamp. There, he grabbed a heavy fleece blanket and wrapped it around Lily's shoulders. His breathing steadied, his purpose sharpened. He could not undo the past. He could not bring Rachel or Grace back, but he could keep this child from living the same nightmare. He flipped the stall's small sign to closed. A trucker eating soup looked up. A man with graying hair and a flannel jacket, the kind of customer who stopped by once a week. His name was Carl. Ethan didn't know more because Carl never offered much. A man carved out of silent routines. Carl stood slowly. "Need me to stay with the place?" His voice was rough, maybe from years of cigarettes or cold nights on the road. He was tall and wiry, his face shadowed with an unshaven scruff. His eyes, however, held a weary kindness, one of those tired souls who had learned empathy through their own bruises. Ethan nodded once. Just for an hour. Carl settled back down with a seriousness that surprised him. "Got it." Ethan wrapped Lily tighter in the blanket. "Come on, we're getting your mom." He lifted her into the back seat of his old pickup truck. Hunter climbed beside her and lay down, placing his warm bulk against her small shoulders. The dog's steady breathing created a rhythm for her panicked heartbeat to follow. The engine rumbled awake. Headlights cut through the billowing snow. Ethan drove into the night, past the warehouses, past the frozen waterfront, toward the rundown building Lily had escaped. Hunter remained alert, ears forward. Lily's fingers clutched the blanket. Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel, the weight of memory pressing hard. Grace would have been Lily's age, and tonight he would not fail another little girl. Snow swept across the windshield as the truck climbed the hill, toward the apartments where trouble waited. The dark stairwell and the second bark. The snow had turned heavier by the time Ethan Cole pulled his truck into the dim lot behind the apartment complex. Wind scraped across the metal siding of nearby warehouses, carrying with it the metallic scent of cold steel and old oil. The building itself stood hunched against the weather, its paint peeling, its windows clouded with grime, as if exhausted by years of neglect. Ethan killed the headlights. Darkness swallowed the truck at once. He twisted in his seat to face Lily and Hunter in the back. Lily Parker, still wrapped tightly in the fleece blanket, looked smaller than she had inside the warm stall. Her cheeks were blotched from crying, and her hair clung damply to her forehead. Fear widened her eyes as she stared at the looming building, but she nodded without protest when Ethan repeated the instructions. "You stay here," he said, voice low but even. "Doors locked. Don't open them for anyone except me." Beside her, Hunter shifted forward and planted himself between Lily and the window. The dog's thick fur bristled faintly, and his amber eyes tracked the shadows with unwavering focus. Ethan rested a hand briefly on the dog's head. A silent command, a promise, and a warning all at once. Then Ethan stepped out, closing the door quietly behind him. The wind cut through his coat immediately, carrying flecks of snow that melted at once against his warm skin. He pulled his collar tighter and crossed the lot toward the metal staircase that clung to the building's side like an afterthought. The railing vibrated under the pressure of the wind, and the graded steps were slick with ice. He climbed, drawing from muscle memory older than his civilian life. His feet landed silently, his breathing slowed, his senses sharpened. Halfway up, he paused. A faint throb of bass leaked through the building's thin walls. Male laughter followed, rough, drunken, careless. Then a slurred voice barked an order, its tone thick with arrogance. It was the kind of voice Ethan had heard in too many corners of the world, someone who enjoyed the sound of his own cruelty. He reached the landing at the second-floor walkway, apartment 207. Light spilled through a thin crack beneath the door. Through it came muffled jeers and the clatter of something knocked over. Ethan leaned closer, his posture angled to hear. A man, voice low, raspy, was speaking. He sounded in his 30s, maybe early 40s, someone who once had muscle but traded it for beer and bravado. The kind of man who hid behind threats because he couldn't stand alone. "If she doesn't pay by tomorrow," the voice said, "we'll clear the place ourselves. No point keeping tenants who don't understand business." A second voice, higher, quicker, snickered. "Should give her one more reminder. Make sure it sticks." Ethan's jaw flexed. He knocked. It was a soft knock. A casual knock. The knock of a curious neighbor, a mask he slipped into with unsettling ease. The door cracked open. The man on the other side was tall and thick-shouldered, with heavy eyelids and the unmistakable slackness of someone drinking cheap whiskey for hours. A patchy beard shadowed his jaw. His breath smelled of sour beer and fried food. He was the type who expected people to fear him, the type who misjudged the quiet ones. "What do you want?" he slurred. Ethan smiled faintly. "Heard some noise? Everything okay in there?" The man blinked, confused. That was all the time Ethan needed. He slid forward, caught the man's wrist, twisted sharply, and pressed him against the wall in one clean motion. The door swung open as the man groaned in pain. Inside, the apartment was a wreck. Furniture overturned, holes punched into the drywall. A broken lamp flickered on the floor. And there, lying near the kitchen counter, was Anna Parker. Anna was in her early 30s, tall but slender, with skin that might once have been fair but was now mottled with bruises. Her blonde hair, still tied back in a loose knot, was streaked with sweat and dust. She held her arms close to her body, her breathing ragged. One side of her face had swollen badly, and her lower lip split in a thin red line. She looked like a woman who had fought until she had nothing left. Two more men stared at Ethan in shock. The first was short but wiry, with a shaved head and pockmarked skin. His expression tightened into a sneer as he grabbed a beer bottle from the table, smashing it against the edge to create a jagged weapon. The second was younger, maybe mid-20s, lanky and jittery, as though guilt couldn't quite keep up with adrenaline in his bloodstream. Ethan released the man he'd pinned and took a single step deeper into the room. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The wiry man lunged first, swinging the broken bottle. Ethan moved with practiced efficiency, slipping aside, catching the man's arm, and throwing him hard into the sofa. The younger man hesitated before charging, but Ethan caught him by the collar and slammed him onto the coffee table, splintering its legs. The fight might have lasted 10 seconds, maybe less. A sound then cut through the air. A bark. Hunter's bark. But not the curious bark from earlier. This was the one Ethan had trained, a deep, urgent signal that meant danger approaching. Ethan froze. His heart slammed once against his ribs, down below, in the lot where Lily waited. He didn't have time. The wiry man grabbed the broken bottle again. Ethan kicked it from his hand, grabbed his jacket, and yanked him into a chokehold until he sagged unconscious. He shoved the younger man against the wall, tying his wrists behind him with a lamp cord. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides, lifted Anna off the floor, she groaned, half-conscious, and headed for the door. By the time he reached the bottom of the stairs, his breath was a furnace and brr. The cold air. There, under the dim glow of a flickering lamppost, stood 2 men approaching the truck. One held a crowbar. The other cupped his hands around his face, peering into the window. And in the truck bed, Hunter stood rigid, teeth bared, every hair on his spine raised like a crest of warning. Their eyes met Ethan's. The balance shifted instantly. The men froze. Ethan adjusted his grip on Anna, his eyes cold and calculating. The night held its breath. The network behind the curtain and the trap at the dock, snow swept across the windshield in restless streaks as Ethan Cole guided the truck through Boston's midnight streets. The storm had thickened, swirling around street lamps like drifting ghosts. Inside the cab, Lily Parker clung to his sleeve, her small fingers trembling. She looked exhausted, her eyes swollen from crying, but she refused to let go. Beside her, Hunter sat upright, his sturdy frame blocking the window as if to shield her from anything that might appear outside. Anna Parker lay unconscious in the back seat, strapped safely under blankets. Her breathing was thin but steady. Ethan checked the mirror every few seconds, the tension in his shoulders never easing. The hospital came into view, its tall windows glowing warm against the storm. He parked beneath the overhang and carried Anna inside. The warmth of the entrance hit him immediately, but it didn't soften the knot in his stomach. A nurse hurried over, a middle-aged woman with tired but sympathetic eyes. She had silver-streaked hair tucked beneath her cap and a calm, no-nonsense manner. Her badge read Sarah Whitmore. Sarah had worked long enough in emergency care to read the story of a beating on someone's face before the doctors even spoke. She didn't ask questions that would slow them down. She simply led the way to a trauma room and ordered a gurney. "Sit tight," she told Ethan, voice gentle but firm. "We'll take care of her." Lily reached for Ethan's coat, her voice barely a whisper. "You won't leave, right?" He knelt to eye level. "I'm staying." Hunter lay down in front of the trauma room door, his tail curled around his paws. He watched every set of footsteps, ears shifting like small radar dishes scanning for threats. Minutes stretched into an hour. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and warm linen. The vents hummed. Lily eventually sat on a chair, knees pulled to her chest, her earlier panic settling into a heavy, exhausted silence. Ethan stood guard beside her. His mind spiraled back to another hospital, another hallway, Rachel on a stretcher, Grace in a blanket too small to hide the truth. The memory cracked through him like a blade. He drew in a slow breath, forcing himself into the present, into Lily's frightened face, into Anna's uncertain fight for life. The past had stolen enough. He wouldn't let it steal tonight. He pulled out his phone. There was only one person he trusted for what came next: Jackson Reed. Jackson arrived at the hospital 30 minutes later, boots echoing down the corridor. He was in his late 30s, athletic build, sharp cheekbones, and dark stubble that always made him look halfway between detective and soldier. His eyes were alert but carried a weight that came from years of seeing too much. A faded scar ran along his jawline, a souvenir from their last deployment together. When Jackson reached them, he looked at Lily first, softening for a moment. Then he turned serious. What happened? Ethan told him everything, from the apartment ambush to the men in the parking lot. Jackson listened in silence. Then he said, "This isn't just muscle for hire. I've been tracking whispers about a development company trying to force tenants out of old buildings all over the city. Intimidation, sabotage, fires, accidents. The same pattern everywhere." As he spoke, the lights above them flickered slightly, just the building settling, but still enough to send a chill through Ethan's spine. "You think this is tied to Northside?" Ethan asked, voice low. "The accident that killed his family." Jackson hesitated. "I can't prove it, not yet, but the same people keep showing up around the edges." Anger simmered beneath Ethan's ribs, cold, controlled, familiar. "Then we don't wait," he said. Jackson nodded. "We build a trap." By dawn they had a plan, one that was part law enforcement procedure, part battlefield ambush. Jackson's department couldn't move legally without more evidence, and the men behind this operation had lawyers, connections, and a few corrupted officers willing to look the other way. So they decided to force the network to expose its own hand. Jackson leaked a piece of accidental information through an informant. Ethan Cole, former SEAL, protective father figure, and newly inserted variable, had stumbled across something valuable Anna had been hiding: money, documents, leverage, whatever the criminals wanted most. And Ethan was willing to negotiate, at the old harbor dock, at midnight, alone. The next night, the storm had calmed, but the cold sharpened. The abandoned dockyard stretched wide and empty, its wooden planks creaking with the tide. Salt mixed with the smell of machine oil. Fog crawled low across the ground. Ethan approached the meeting point with the silent, steady stride of someone who had faced worse than shadows. Hunter moved beside him in full working focus, ears high, jaw set, every step perfectly controlled. The dog's breath hung in the air like pale smoke. Hidden within stacked cargo containers, Jackson and a team of trusted officers waited, each fitted with chest cameras and audio gear. The men were carefully chosen, veterans of tough cases, people Jackson would trust with his life. No badges visible, no sirens, not yet. A sleek black SUV rolled into the dockyard, its headlights cut through the fog like blades. Martin Hale stepped out. Hale was in his mid-40s, tall, lean, and polished. Expensive coat, tailored trousers, a silk scarf lightly knotted at his throat. His dark hair was styled back, every strand in place. His face carried the smug calm of a man who believed the world bent beneath his money. His eyes, however, betrayed a sliver of cruelty, a predator's indifference to suffering, masked by charm. Two guards flanked him. One was short, with a thick neck and shaved head. The other tall and muscular, with a massive scar down one cheek. "Mr. Cole," Hale greeted, voice smooth like lacquered wood, "you've caused a bit of trouble." Ethan didn't respond. Hale smirked. "Let's make this simple. Tell me where the woman hid the money, and I make your problems disappear. You'd be surprised how many buildings have accidents. The word struck like a blow. Jackson, hidden in the containers, stiffened. Ethan's face darkened. Then Hale said the one thing he shouldn't have. Just like that place in Northside years ago, tragic, really, but profitable. A stillness fell, cold, electric. Somewhere in the shadows, Jackson thumbed his radio. Ethan's hand moved, barely noticeable. A small gesture. Hunter lunged. The dog's powerful body collided with the armed guard, knocking him off balance. The man's gun skittered across the dock. The second guard reached for his weapon, but Ethan closed the distance, grabbing his wrist and driving his knee into the man's stomach. Shouts exploded through the dockyard. Jackson's team stormed from cover, red and blue lights igniting the fog. Hale froze, caught between flight and denial, as body cameras recorded everything. His threats, his confession, his order to attack. Within seconds, he was on the ground, wrists zip-tied, the illusion of power stripped away. Hunter returned to Ethan's side, chest heaving, but eyes sharp. Ethan exhaled, slow and steady. It wasn't justice, not yet, but it was a start. The second winter, and the family without blood, snow drifted through the narrow harbor streets in slow, quiet spirals, as if Boston itself were exhaling after a long, weary year. It had been months since the night Lily Parker collapsed in the snow outside Ethan Cole's food stall. The city had changed in small but meaningful ways since then, some visible, many hidden beneath the surface like roots pushing through frozen earth. The old apartment complex where Lily once lived was now wrapped in yellow tape and scaffolding. Investigators, city officials, and a rotation of inspectors walked its halls daily, documenting structural neglect, forged contracts, and patterns of intimidation linked to Martin Hale's company. Families who had lived there in fear were relocated to safer housing, and for the first time in decades, the city acknowledged the silent suffering of its poorest corners. The storm of legal battles following Martin Hale's arrest filled newspapers for weeks. His expensive suits and polished facade could not shield him from the dozens of testimonies that poured in. Tenants, ex-employees, and a few enforcers who turned on him to save themselves. The case was labeled one of the largest corruption scandals in recent years. But for Ethan, the world had shrunk into something simpler, quieter, and more personal. Harbor Night Grill looked different now, not by much, just enough to show that the place had been touched by gentle hands. On the left side of the stall, next to the chalkboard menu, hung a hand-painted sign that read Kids Corner, complete with a cartoonish picture of a large man in a beanie, a huge German shepherd, and a smiling woman holding flowers. The artist was 7 years old and proud of her work. Lily Parker stood on a wooden stool inside the stall, her head barely reaching the counter. Strands of dark hair fell over her eyes as she helped assemble sandwiches. Her hands moved clumsily but earnestly, adding too much lettuce or too little cheese, humming off key as she worked. The smell of tomato sauce often ended up on her sleeves, and sometimes her nose. Ethan found it impossible not to smile when he glanced at her. She reminded him of chaos mixed with sunshine, something he thought he would never see again. Hunter, now 6 years old, had taken on the solemn role of guardian. His coat was thicker this winter, the black and tan blending like the colors of warm earth. He rarely left Lily's side when she was in or near the stall. Whenever a car slowed too close, or a stranger approached with too much interest, Hunter would shift his weight, raise his head, and let them know that the small girl had a protector. Anna Parker visited every evening after work. She had changed since the night Ethan carried her down the icy stairs. Though she still bore faint scars and occasional dizziness, her posture was steadier, her cheeks fuller. She had found a new job at a small bakery owned by an elderly woman with a soul. Sharp voice but a kind heart. Dough had strengthened Anna's arms, and safety had softened her eyes. Tonight, she arrived wrapped in a dark green coat, her blonde hair tucked behind her ear. She greeted Ethan with a tired but grateful smile, carrying a paper bag that smelled of cinnamon and fresh bread. "You're spoiling us," Ethan teased. Anna shrugged shyly. "Old Mrs. Harrington insists. She says Lily puts too much cheese on everything and needs a balanced diet." Lily, hearing her name, turned around with a guilty grin and a smear of sauce on her cheek. As the night quieted, customers thinned out, leaving only the warm sizzle of the grill and the hum of the heater. The sky above the harbor glowed a gentle orange from the city lights, reflecting off snow-filled clouds. Anna set a steaming cup of coffee beside Ethan. "You should sit. You work more hours than any 3 people I know." He didn't sit, Though he appreciated the gesture, he rarely sat while the stall was open. Old habits, old instincts. But he took the coffee, feeling its warmth anchor him. At the far corner of the stall, Lily sat with a stack of paper and crayons. Her tongue poked slightly from her mouth as she concentrated on her drawing. Hunter lay at her feet, head resting on her shoelaces, eyes half closed. After several minutes, Lily finally held up her latest creation. A small house, simple, tidy, with smoke rising from the chimney. A tall man behind a counter, flipping something on a grill. A woman carrying a tray of bread. A girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile. And a big dog, larger than all of them. Above it she had written, in uneven letters, "Our family." Ethan's breath caught. The drawing trembled slightly in Lily's hands as she walked it over to him. She looked hopeful, but unsure, like she was offering a part of herself. He took the picture gently, almost reverently. Something inside him shifted, quiet but deep, like ice thawing after too many winters. Rachel's face flickered through his mind, Grace's laughter. The ache of loss swelled as it always did, but this time it didn't hollow him out. It mingled with something warm. Lily tugged his sleeve. "Uncle Ethan," she whispered, Do you think your daughter was brave?" The question hit him harder than any blow he'd faced in the field. He had to swallow before answering. "Yes," he said softly, "I think she was brave, and kind, and strong." Lily leaned against him, resting her small head on his arm. "I think she would have liked me." His voice was barely audible. "I think she would have loved you." Hunter shifted closer, placing his head on Lily's knee as if sealing the moment. When the stall finally closed, snow fell in soft, lazy flakes. The harbor murmured with distant water and the clink of ships at anchor. Ethan turned off the grill, locked the metal shutter, and stood beneath the awning with Lily and Anna beside him. Warm light spilled over them, forming a small island of peace against the winter night. The city would remember the scandal, the police arrests, the brave informants. People would talk about corruption, justice, and the surprising courage of a former Navy SEAL. But those headlines meant little here. Here, what mattered was that a small girl's hand had reached out through the snow and darkness, and Ethan had taken it, pulling himself back toward a life he never believed he could deserve again. To Lily, that night had given her something she thought she had lost forever. A home, in every sense of the word. In the end, what happened to Ethan, Anna, and little Lily wasn't just a story about danger or courage. It was a reminder of something far more powerful, that sometimes, in the coldest nights of our lives, God sends the people we need in the most unexpected ways. A lost little girl in the snow, a broken-hearted soldier hiding behind a grill, a loyal dog who never left his side. And somehow, all those small pieces were woven together into a miracle only God could see coming. Life doesn't always give us perfect moments. Most days are quiet, ordinary, and filled with worries we carry alone. But every now and then, a tiny spark appears, a helping hand, a kind word, a stranger who chooses to care, reminding us that God is still working in the background, stitching hope into places we thought were gone forever. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need a little light today. Leave a comment, let us know where you were watching from, and subscribe so you never miss the next story of grace and resilience. And may God bless you, keep you safe, and guide you through whatever winter you're walking through tonight.